Everybody, and welcome to Tuesday Talk. Thanks for being out on a rainy Tuesday morning. And to get us started, Ms. Hagner is going to come up with a update on a great new activity.
Good morning. Good morning. I just want to remind everybody that we are doing a swap this weekend. Okay?
Friday.
Friday? You bring your stuff down to the breezeway on hangers and put it up on the racks that maintenance is going to set up for us, we've been told. Then you can come and you can shop. Just pick something up that you find from somebody else's closet that looks good to you. We'll also invite the associates to come and go through stuff and pick up what they like. At the end of the day, whatever's left, we will pack up, and the next morning when the Sheriff's Youth Ranch comes for their pickup, we will have them take it away.
From 8 to 2.
From 8 to 2, yeah. Yeah, the pickup is from 8 to 2? No, the swap is from 8 to 2. The pickup, the schedule is in your thing from Tuesday Talk last week. It'll just, each building has an hour and a half, something like that. So we'll get that done. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about for just a minute is that the Employee Gift Fund. We are almost halfway to our goal, but we only have 4 months left. We need to pick up the pace, people. You've got to remember how our employees and associates have really stepped up to the plate this last year and a half. And we're going through it again. And they're doing their best. If you can pick up your donations a little bit, get them in faster, maybe increase by 10%, just to make sure that we have enough to really say thank you to everybody, okay?
All right, thank you. Okay, we had a guest speaker this morning. Dave Little from our health center was going to be joining us. He was the director of therapy, and he has either forgotten about us or is running late. I'm not sure which. We're trying to get a hold of him now. But let's go ahead and change up the agenda, and we'll go directly into the COVID report. How many of you are getting a little anxious? Okay.
Are you anxious?
So I completely understand that, and I'm going to give you some numbers today, and the numbers are alarming, but there are some conclusions that we can dive into, and I'm not nervous, and so I want to share with you why, and take a look at some of these numbers, and we'll go from there. Okay? All right. We're going to get set. Okay, this is our COVID update for August 3rd. Next slide, Don. So this weekend here in Florida, the number of new cases grew at the highest rate since the start of the pandemic, which was back in February of 2020. So these were the highest numbers we had seen in over 18 months. You can see the positivity rate. Previous week was at 18.1. We were down to 17.8. And so although the rate went down, it was because the reporting didn't occur on Saturday and Sunday. And so the cumulative number is down a little less than what we might have anticipated. So that has changed, and I'll show you a new number in just a minute. Next slide. New cases for the past 10 weeks. Now, this is what has everyone really anxious, and we can go back and see that during May and June, we're pretty stable. There were not a bunch of new cases. And then just take a look at what happened. This is for the state of Florida. Take a look at what happened on 7/2 as 23,000. On 7/9 it doubled to almost 50,000. The following week, it jumped by 40% to 73,000. And then this last week, it jumped to 110,000 new cases. And so if you dig into the data, the vast majority of those new cases are not in our age group. They are in a younger segment of the population. And so when we start to think about COVID and the journey over the last 18 months, we can break it down into almost two different journeys or spikes. That first initial spike really impacted the most vulnerable in society. It impacted those in long-term care, those over the age of 65, those with pre-existing conditions, and that's where we saw the numbers. This time around, this is like the fourth spike and the fourth recycling of the variants, and it's going after a different age group. It doesn't mean that you're not, because of your age, still susceptible, but it means that the vast majority of the new cases are not occurring in that age group of 65 and older. Next slide. In the past week here in the United States, the new daily reported cases rose by 54%, the deaths rose by 31%, and the hospitalization rate rose by 42%. This is the one thing that does have me nervous, is we have a couple of our major hospitals here in the Tampa Bay area that is on what we call diversion status, which means if you have COVID and you need acute care services, they're not able to accommodate you and they divert you to a hospital outside of our service area. And that's simply because of the large number of COVID cases that acute care centers are having to process, and they are completely overwhelmed at this point. And so this is not a good time to get COVID, because if you require hospitalization, it may not be in our county. And so this is the one area that has everyone a little nervous, is acute care beds are available, but they may not be available in our immediate service area. Next slide. So let's take a look at, we sort of saw the numbers, but this is just a better visual graph to show you what's happening with the average positivity rate. Now, I expanded this and I'm looking here at the United States as opposed to Florida because I think it's more graphic. You can see back in 6/6 here in the United States, the positivity rate on a weekly basis was somewhere down at about 2 to 3%. And we've seen a gradual increase. On August 1st, that positivity rate has grown to 25%. So 25% of the individuals presenting in hospital with symptoms are testing positive for COVID. This is a huge number. And again, this is sort of what people are seeing and reacting to. But now I want you to look at the next slide. Same database, but look at the number of people who are dying from the exposure. Way back in June, we were at 1.7%, and the fatality rate is not going up, it's declining. So that's what we need to focus on. And so yes, COVID is out there, it is expanding, the number of new cases are growing, but COVID, particularly if you've been vaccinated, is not a disease that will cause you to lose your life. That's what the numbers are saying. Next slide. So here's a whole bunch of information, and I'm going to focus in on this last paragraph. And so the question becomes, does being vaccinated prevent you from being a spreader? And the answer to that is no. And so high viral loads, and what they are discovering is the viral load, the percentage of the virus in your blood taken through testing. That's a large viral load. between an unvaccinated and a vaccinated person does not show up in lab testing as being different. And so we know that the impact of the viral load, the symptoms generated from the virus, are better if you're vaccinated, but the ability to carry the viral load, the shedding, that's what would cause the shedding or the transmitting, it's not different by lab testing between someone who's been vaccinated and someone who is unvaccinated. And so here's what the CDC is saying. High viral loads suggest an increased risk of transmission and a raised concern that unlike other variants, vaccinated people infected with Delta can transmit the disease. That's the CDC director. The finding is concerning and was a pivotal discovery leading to the CDC updated mask recommendation. And the masking recommendation was updated to ensure the vaccinated public would not unknowingly transmit virus to others, including their unvaccinated or compromised loved ones. And so when we go back and say, okay, CDC says you don't have to wear a mask if you're outdoors. And then they said you don't have to wear a mask if you're indoors. And then they said you don't have to wear a mask if you're vaccinated. And so as new data comes in and as the situation changes, so does the CDC's position. And so recently, the CDC said everybody has to wear a mask, whether you're indoor or outdoors. It's something we recommend. And the reason for that recommendation is found in the fact that the viral load of vaccinated and unvaccinated people is exactly the same. And so you can become a carrier if you are vaccinated and you are an unknown carrier because you likely are going to be asymptomatic. And so that was the reasoning behind the CDC decision to go with masking. Next slide. So where do we stand? Here's something that we're beginning to get data on. Always in the past, we had sort of relied on suspicions because there just wasn't adequate data out there at the 1st of June. You may recall that in the state of Florida, we only had 2 reported cases of Delta. That was the big concerned virus. It's now nearly 82.6% of the new cases that are reporting are the Delta variant. The Delta variant is said to be 1,000 times more contagious than the original COVID. And so what can we expect from that? Probably more infections, more new cases. Here's the good news. Regency Oaks has no current residents who are positive. Regency Oaks has 5 current associates who are positive, and those associates are either tavern workers or south building housekeepers. So I'm going to come back and I want to talk about what we're going to do about that and what our plan is. So next. So what this is going to require us to do is change the way that we fight the virus and the pandemic. Previously, we have used, I'm going to use a couple of football terminology, we've had what we termed a preventative defense. What we had at Regency Oaks was a large group of vulnerable residents who, because of their age or medical condition, potentially had immune-related illnesses that perhaps made them somewhat weaker. We had a communal living arrangement. We all live together. We share a common dining room, and our activities we do as a group, and we gather in large numbers as a group, and so it was a communal living arrangement. Our approach initially, and this is in going way back to February, March of last year, was to gather in the herd, to pull everyone close, and then to protect the herd. And so how we did that is we started limiting access We started to pull back services. We shut down activities. We shut down dining. And you'll remember that there were like 14 different layers that we put in place, and each one of the layers had 7 or 8 restrictions. And so at the end of the day, we had tightened this thing up so that we were like almost like a prison. People weren't coming in, you weren't going out, we didn't let you out of the apartments. We totally controlled it by limiting the access and controlling the spread of the disease through restrictions. We stopped mobility. Mobility is defined as the ability to get around either within the community or outside the community, and then we isolated the herd. And that's how that was our defense on the original COVID. Things have changed. We're not going to use that approach this second time around, and there's some reasons for that. So let's take a look at the next slide. We're going to use a blitzing defense to try to overcome this problem now. Why? First, the herd is protected. 97% of the herd has been vaccinated. We know that there's not a single member of the herd right now that is showing symptoms or is suspected of having COVID or flu-like symptoms. The herd is protected. We're going to avoid the campus-wide restrictions that were so punitive and difficult to live with. We're not going, at this point, to require masks. We are not ever planning to limit visitors, to control mobility, to shut down services, to restrict access, to eliminate our dining and go to carry out. We're going to continue to operate under normal conditions. But here's how we're going to change and deal with this. We're going to isolate the threat, we're going to contain the threat, and we're going to call them out. It's going to be a targeted response, it's quick response, it's time limited, and it's going to control the exposure. So what does that mean? So let's just go back and let me share a little bit more information about the 2 exposures that we've had. So we had 5 people overall, and 2 of them last Friday were from the tavern. It actually happened on Thursday. So 2 people is not a lot of people, but it represents 32% of the tavern staffing. And so we have dedicated staffing to the tavern. We had 2 people pop. We took a targeted, quick, isolated response to immediately contain the situation. We shut the tavern down. We sent all those people home. We quarantined, we tested, and now we're monitoring. We just finished day 4 of no new symptoms from any of the tavern people. They are recovering. We will be reopening the tavern, and I don't know whether that's going to be Thursday, Friday, or maybe even Monday, but it's a limited time. We're going to address the problem exactly where it occurs, as opposed to doing these campus-wide mandates that are so invasive. Same thing with housekeeping. So over the weekend, we had 4 people, all South Building housekeepers, test positive for COVID. So what we did was a quick, targeted, time-limited, immediate response to control the situation. We shut down housekeeping services. We tested every one of the housekeepers, whether you were north or south. We got that baseline data. We've been able to determine that we stopped the spread. No one else is showing signs or symptoms. We will allow a short period of time to go through. It has to be a minimum of 5 days, no more than 7. So that if you're symptomatic, that's when you're going to start to show your symptoms, and we'll be able to test you. We have the capacity here at Regency Oaks to rapid test on a minute's notice. We can do it multiple times a day or a week. And so you contain it, you respond immediately, you eliminate the threat to the residents, and it's small, targeted approaches and part of a blitzing defense to control this that avoids all those restrictions that I don't think any of us want to go back to. All right. Is that it?
Yes, sir.
That's it. Okay. The COVID meeting doesn't mean anything to you. I can tell you that the staff is certainly excited about it. But it allows us to just sort of track the numbers, and we look at them every single day, and we go through each of the departments and talk about, where are our exposures, what are our weaknesses, is there anything we need to be doing, and it's an interdisciplinary approach, and so everyone who has input is there. We haven't looked at these numbers since I went and looked it up. The last time I shared any of this information was way back in March. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update so that you have those numbers. Here in Florida, this is cumulative. We've had 2.6 million cases of COVID since this started in February of 20, 39,000 fatalities. That number back in January of this year was 34,000. So over the last 7 months, it's gone up a little over 5,000. If that's a loved one, that's a terrible loss and a tragedy. But from the perspective of where we were and how fast the cases were coming along back in January and February, those numbers are positive. In Pinellas County, we're 91,717 cases, and so that is tracking at the same rate as it was tracking prior to the January outbreak, which was the third outbreak of COVID. And so Pinellas County continues to do a really good job of controlling the numbers and preventing the spread of the virus. Here in the United States, we're at 35,131,000 cases with 613,000 fatalities. Here in Pinellas County yesterday, we tested 24,000 people. That's a really high number. You may recall way back when in December, January, when it was so hard to get the vaccine, we were testing 300 and 400 people a day. Now we're up to 24,000 people a day. The positivity rate yesterday was 10.3%. It's low. We anticipate that today it will be back up to 16, 17, maybe 18%. The Monday testing cycle is always low because the data does not get reported over the weekend. It gets rolled up into the numbers, and it shows up on the Tuesday report, which comes in at about 10 o'clock every Tuesday. I tried to get the update before I came, but they had not updated it. So we'll look at those numbers. Residents in quarantine, IL, AL, skilled nursing, it's 0. There's not a single resident that we suspect of having COVID or flu-like symptoms. The residents in the South building that had it 2.5 weeks ago are out of quarantine, and they've recovered and are doing well. In the staff, we have the 5 positive IL staff members we talked about. There's no one in assisted living, and there's 1 staff member in skilled nursing that's right at 12 or 13 days getting ready to come off quarantine. So we look really good. Here are the cumulative numbers for Regency Oaks from the start of the disease until today. We've had 27 positive residents, and that's in IL, AL, or skilled nursing. We've had 52 positive staff members. That's across the entire campus. And then look at the numbers. The negative residents that we've tested are 1,606, and the negative staff is 4,625. So you've heard me talk about from the very start of COVID that how we would eventually defeat COVID is when the number of people who were vaccinated, recovered, outnumbered the number of new people who were sick, infected, and unvaccinated. And it created the bell curve. And so we've always talked about getting on the downside of the bell curve. We're clearly there. Our vaccinated and recovering individuals exceed the positive or currently ill numbers 400 to 1. And so I know if you watch, Action News or, any of the TV stations, this is a prime story. And you can get it 24/7. That's all that people are talking about. And I don't want you to not watch it, but I also want you to know that, we're looking at this. We think Regency Oaks, our numbers are good. We have a vaccinated herd with 97% of us vaccinated. And our exposure, we have to be careful, but there's nothing out there to me that I can see that suggests that we need to panic. And so we're going to use a measured approach. It's going to be quick, timely, responsive, and targeted. And we're not at this point ever having to consider again, hopefully, mass restrictions and infringements on your right of mobility and your ability to lead your life.
In the tavern, did you use the UV machines?
So, great question. So, I will. So, in the tavern, did we use the UV machines? And so the answer is no, and it's for a couple of different reasons. We now know that the virus is not spread by contact. This is an airborne virus, period. We also know that the virus cannot live on a surface maximum for more than 3 days. And so shutting the tavern down becomes as effective as disinfecting the tavern with the UV machine. The other thing that I always stress is the UV machines have been very effective in terms of sanitizing units over in the health center that are transitioning. And so we use them for every single one of our COVID and isolation wards. When we have someone move out, we go in and do the UV treatment before we accept the new resident in. But what distinguishes that is the fact that it's an immediate turnaround. It's someone's out of the bed, someone's back in the bed. And so that's why we use it over at the health center. The UV machines are available for us in the IL, but they have limited application. And it's because the primary means of spreading this pandemic, this virus, is airborne. It's person to person. It is not skin to skin or contact surface to surface. Great question.
I'm interested in a booster shot, and once the FDA and the CDC would approve that, you did such a wonderful job of giving us the vaccination shot. I would hope that you would be considering to give the booster shots here.
So on the booster shot, here's the latest I know. In the fall, we will be doing the flu shot. The flu shot's very, very important because you want to make sure your immune system is fully charged and that you're not going to be susceptible to other viruses, including COVID. What I'm reading is that the booster shot, and all the manufacturers are recommending it, but they are not recommending it until later in the year, probably November or December, after you have received your flu shot. I've even heard some suggest that a flu shot is going to be a requirement in order to receive a booster shot. Now that's not cut in stone. I've seen that in some of the literature. And so the booster shot I think is coming, but I think it's going to be later in the year. And the one other thing is, remember, Regency Oaks is now set up to provide the COVID vaccination. And so I would think the same thing is going to happen now that we are a provider and we're registered and certified to do that. I would think it's not going to be a third-party contractor like a pharmacy. It's going to be Regency Oaks who will administer the vaccine, the booster vaccine, when it becomes available.
I am concerned about the staff that aren't vaccinated. What is the percentage of staff that's vaccinated?
Yeah. And so the percentage of our staff that is vaccinated is low.
How low?
And so it depends on whether or not the answer is somewhere between 45 and 60%, depending upon whether you add in the 52 servers who are all minors. And so if you take them out of the equation, it's about 60%. If you include them in the equation, it's about 45%. Here's where I stand first on vaccinating minors. The CDC does not recommend it, I don't recommend it, and most of our parents feel like they don't recommend it either. And they tell me when I talk to the parents, there are two things. One, this is not an FDA-approved vaccine. It's being used under emergency statutes. And my parents say when the FDA approves it, I'll consider it for my child. And what drives it is long-term consequences. There are no known long-term consequences for this vaccine. Long-term consequences when you're 75 are different than when you're 16. And so I support our parents in their decision not to vaccinate their minor children at this point.
Well,
And
the 40% that aren't vaccinated, why can't you make them be?
And-
There are I've started asking people, there's some very important people not vaccinated.
Yeah. So that is something that LCS is considering. You just have seen this past week announcements made by some of industries that they are considering that, and if you're not vaccinated, you will not be able to work. Joel Nelson, our CEO, issued a letter last Thursday, and in it he made the same announcement, and it applies to all of LCS associates as well as those individuals who work in the community. Joel has set a target date of October 15th, at which time anyone who works in a community will be required to get a vaccine in order to work at Regency Oaks. Now, there will be some exemptions. Minors may be one of them. There probably will be religious exemptions. There will probably be some exemptions based on medical conditions. So I don't have the policy yet to tell you more specifically what those exemptions will look like, but that is something that is going to be coming in some form.
People who are allowing unvaccinated people to work always say that they're testing the unvaccinated once a week. Are our servers being tested regularly?
Yeah. So great question, and it is based on the testing is based upon a lot of different factors, but whether you have direct one-on-one contact, whether you work in a licensed building or an unlicensed building, whether the percentage, the number of new cases per capita is above or below a certain level. We currently are on twice a week testing, Tuesday and Friday, Dave? Tuesday and Friday. And so testing is not required for vaccinated associates, but for unvaccinated associates, we're on a twice a week testing, and there are some
Including the servers?
servers are, and so we've always got to take the servers out because servers are minors, and you cannot vaccinate, you cannot test a minor without parental consent, and our parents have determined that that is not something they're going to participate in. And again, that's something I understand. I don't think if you're 16 years old, you may want to have a COVID diagnosis and have that in your health records at an early age. And so the whole issue of minors is not been decided, and it's not just LCS, it's the CDC. The CDC is recommending you should not test, you should not administer a vaccine to minors.
It's
And
like 12 and above, it's,
that may be your definition of minors, but that's not what
the CDC announcements that I heard were that it was approved for 12 and above.
it's approved, but it's an emergency use approval.
Well, it
And-
is for us too.
Yes, but again, your long-term consequences are very, very different than someone who's 16 years old. And so, we know it's a concern. It's a concern of yours. It's something that we're anxious about, but that whole decision is going to have to be decided, and it's not going to be decided by Brant Spence. It's going to come from CDC and the Centers for Medicare Studies and the health department, our government agencies. They're the ones who ultimately will make that decision.
What's the test again that you do, and how long does it take?
So there are multiple tests that you can take. The one that Regency Oaks relies on primarily is a rapid test. And it's a nasal swab. It's a lower chamber. It doesn't go up into the brain pan. It's relatively, it's a minor procedure. It's not uncomfortable. You can put the sample in a individual self-contained device, and it will read and give you a result within 15 minutes.
How long after exposure would you get the disease?
So after the exposure is almost instantaneous. So if you are exposed, and remember we go back and talk about time over target. So if you had a long exposure, you sat down and had lunch with someone for 45 minutes and neither of you were wearing a mask and they were in day 3 to 5, which is the virtual shedding period, you almost instantly are now infected. The testing will pick that up, certainly within 24 hours. We typically do not test until you are symptomatic. You become symptomatic in day 3 to 5, and that's also the period at which time you are virtually shedding. So in days 1 through 3, you may have the virus, but you are not infectious to others. You're not a carrier at that point.
But the day they shut the tavern down, I had breakfast there, but I had no symptoms.
Right. And so, great point. And so, if at day 3 you're not showing symptoms, your chances are really, really good that you're not infected. At day 5, if you're not showing symptoms, you're not infected. And so that's why when we shut the tavern down on Friday, it's not immediately reopening. We want to make sure we give everybody a chance to develop symptoms so that we can evaluate the depth of the exposure. And there have been no new reported symptoms. So we're feeling pretty comfortable with the tavern that we were able to contain the exposure.
What were their symptoms? What are the most common ones?
So right now, because it's the Delta variant, the symptoms are a little bit different than standard COVID. The chief complaint is not temperature and body aches. It's raging headaches with chills. And you also can have some intestinal issues. And so the symptoms are just a little bit different.
You said headache with what?
Headache, just a raging headache, and chills are the primary symptoms of the Delta variant. Okay, so what do you want to do? Do you want to go 15 more minutes and listen to Dave, or should we invite Dave back next week? We've exceeded our time, and I'll sort of take your lead. If you want to stick around for 15 more minutes, or do you want to reschedule Dave for next week?
What's he talking about?
He's next week. Next. How many right now?
Right now.
How many next week? 50-50, of course. Okay, I think we're going to lose the 50% who want to push them till next week. So Dave, would you be able to accommodate us and come back and join us next week? Thank you. One other real quick thing. Real quick, hold on everybody, real quick, give me 5 seconds. Call them all. We did a Call them all yesterday. One of the great new features of the Call them all is it allows us to go back and see who got it and who didn't. We had 201 live answers. We had 185 voicemails. We had 21 busy signals. If we call you and your phone is busy, it does not leave a message. And so I just want you to be aware of that. It's one of the differences between a text them all and a call them all. But more importantly, we had 10 individuals that came back invalid. And so if you did not get a call, I brought the list of invalid, and you can come check your name. Some of you were on there because you had selected do not call me, but others appear to be a problem. One of the things the system does is it calls you on the 2 attempts. And so they'll give you the chance that you are either on the phone with someone else or there was a problem in the connection, so it will call you a second time. After the second time, it discontinues. So if you didn't get a phone call, I brought the list, and please come up and check your name.
As I understand it, housekeeping will start next week, will it?
We don't know that question. Great question. Don's question is, we understand housekeeping will start next week. We haven't made that decision because we just shut it down yesterday. So we know we have to go at least 3 days and maybe 5 days before we can make that decision, because we don't know what else will pop.
If not, can the housekeepers from the north come to the south?
No. and you know, it's the housekeepers at the north. They have a full schedule, and
We're without it the whole week. Why can't they be without it?
yeah, I'm not going to do it that way.
Why don't they deliver linens to us? Deliver linens and take away the dirty?
That's a great idea.
And then they offered us mops last time.
Repeat that, please.
Yeah, and so the suggestion is are we going to do a linen exchange? That's a great idea. I don't know what Jesse has planned, but I'll follow up. We'll make sure we include that in Tuesday talk.
It's cheaper.
Yeah,
I can sleep on their sheets.
yeah, that's a great idea.
And the mops last time they let us.
No, I don't think so. Because the reason we're not going with the extensive cleaning supplies is we're not going to be down for a month. We're going to target it, isolate, quick, but a linen exchange is a great idea.
Grant, any update on the internet contract?
So internet contracts are all in. I need to get with Fred Green and start the review process with our tech committee. And Fred, I don't even know if Fred's here. Fred's here. Yep, Fred. Yeah, so it's all the contracts all the proposals are in. We just need to start make a decision.
When do we get our copies to spend the South Library?
No copier.
Yeah, there's a printer. Yeah, no copiers for the library, just printers for both of the libraries. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I just said, please, the rest of the audience be quiet so we can see what the
question is and what your answer is.
Great question.
And I missed this last.
So the question is, when do we get the copier in the South Library? And we don't have a copier slated for the library, we just have the printers. And we don't support copier operations in the library because it's a very costly way of getting a copy. And I don't have the exact figures, but I'll give you an estimate. A copy on one of those small copiers is about 87 cents. If you come downstairs and do it, I can do it for 18 cents. And so it's not economically feasible to have a copier up in the library. Please come downstairs. You're welcome to use our big copies. It's absolutely true if you're doing larger projects and want to make 50 or more copies. It's much more efficient to come downstairs. Yes, sir.
Your Cola Mall, what were the numbers?
201 live, 185 voice, 21 busy, and 12 invalid.
And I have two other comments. Someone doesn't know how to spell threats.
Or herd.
Or what?
Herd, H-E-R-D, not H-E-A-R-D.
Okay.
We just want to,
Thank you.
I'd be happy to prove.
Okay, we'll run a spell check on that.
So what happens, I did not get a phone call. Who do I report to?
Him after the meeting.
Did the employees that are out sick get the shot?
I don't know. Does anyone, Leslie, Tiffany, I don't know whether
Not
they,
sure.
I don't know the answer to that. I'd share it if I knew the answer to that, but I don't know the answer to that. And I don't want to speculate.
Yeah.
well, people in the, people that work in the tavern are not, under 18. They're like,
Right, right.
older,
Yeah, and so that's not a bad question, but I just don't know the answer. In our contact tracing, the focus is, oops, you have it, and so we don't focus as much on, okay, did you get a vaccine? We're more focused on where did you acquire it, who have you been exposed to? So it's more forward-looking. Great question. I just don't have the answer. I certainly would share it with you. If you want to call me later, I'll look it up. All right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.